How to create a brand kit for your business. So, what is a brand kit and why do we need one? Well, a brand kit is basically a comprehensive collection of visual assets and guidelines that are going to define how our brand should appear across various platforms. So, the basic idea is we want a uniform look and feel to all the things we're going to create. There's a lot of different places where our business, our marketing, and various other content and elements from what we do are going to appear. And if we have things sort of all over the place and we're creating from scratch each time without any sort of guidelines or any particular color scheme and things like that, what happens is we aren't able to build a consistent brand. So a branding kit typically includes things like logos and color palettes, typography. So we're going to talk about fonts and font sizes and font weights, the various colors and which ones go together, design principles, or sometimes an overall look and feel, whether or not it's, shabby chic or it's elegant or sophisticated or modern. There are various ways that we can describe the look and feel that we like and the aesthetic that we're going for with our brand. And if we create that in advance in a deliberate way as a branding kit, it serves as sort of the underpinning for all the things that we're going to create and for everybody that's ever going to work for us too. So whether or not it's things that we're creating ourselves or whether or not it's things that we're outsourcing or having other team members make, the result will be the same and consistent because we're using a branding kit. And the beautiful thing about this is it typically can fit on one or maybe two pages. And whether they're digital or physical, the idea is it's pretty simple to be able to share that with other people and have everybody use that as the guideline that they go off of when they're creating content for us or when they're creating any sort of marketing material or any forward-facing thing. We probably want to use it inside our business as well, but certainly anything that's customer-facing. And so those design principles, they serve as a reference. So for anyone creating any content for the brand, they're going to be able to use that. So creating a branding kit is absolutely really essential for establishing a consistent visual identity for your brand. And that's going to be really important over time. It's not something that from a branding kit, we're going to get instant results or just because we make 4 or 5 posts or 4 or 5 ads with the same look and feel, all of a sudden, sales and leads and traffic is going to explode. But over time, we start to get to recognize and get recognized for the branding that we've got. We all know brands we can think of, regardless of where we live or what our sensibility is, that we can recognize just by the font or by the look, by the feel, by the music. There are elements of things that the minute that we see it, it's instantly recognizable. And that's because all of that branding work has gone into it. And it's because they've specifically and deliberately gone after a really specific aesthetic that they've repeated over and over and over again. And over time, it starts to really build up credibility and it starts to build up awareness to a point where, it becomes far better and far easier then to get our messages across much quicker and for people to recognize who we are than it would be in the beginning. So let's talk about the steps to actually build an effective branding kit, because I think this is really important and every business should have this. So if you're in startup phase and you're just sort of getting going, this is a great way to get started, because if you have this to start with, then everything else that you make are going to be things that you can be confident they're all in alignment. If you already have an established business but you haven't done this, this will save you a tremendous amount of time, because instead of each time needing to go back to other stuff you've created and use that as a reference point to figure out, hey, what was the branding guideline for this? How did we do this? Instead, you'll actually be able to do it because you'll have a guideline that then you can always go back to. So the first thing I think that's really important is, the first stage is to define our brand identity. So we want to start by deciding what it is we even want to look like, what it is we even want to convey with our branding. And so the brand story starting with a narrative that sort of encapsulates our brand's mission, vision, and values. So this sometimes can affect the visual aesthetic also. Sometimes they're unrelated, but it depends on what we're going for. And so we need to think about what our mission is, what our vision is, what our values are. And we need to figure out, okay, is there a particular look and feel, a particular color scheme? Are there fonts that really convey that really, really well? Because if there are, those are the ways we want to lean. We want it to naturally feel like it's aligned. In general, we'd be able to probably ram in any sort of aesthetic to connect it to our brand if we really wanted to. But why not make it easier? Why not go with something that seems intuitive and logical for something that we're doing? So, just as a quick example, if we wanted something that was sophisticated, we aren't going to use font families that are playful and sketch drawn, because obviously they're not going to convey professionalism. We're going to want something that looks a little bit more professional. Conversely, if we want a brand that's more playful, then we would want to go with that. And so we've got some options there. But basically, the mission, the vision, and the values, and that will help us align basically all the visual elements that we're going to create with our brand's purpose. And it's important to have that stuff on there also just for the pure content being created. So even when we have the branding kit put together, if people are making posts for us or ads or whatever, we want them to know the vision, the mission. So the images that they use, so the basic look and feel for everything that they're going for is all congruent and makes sense for what we're doing. So the other thing that we want to consider is the target audience, right? Who is our audience? Because that can help guide the tone and style of our visual elements. If we're in a business to business sort of market, then we're going to want a different feel than if we're going after, like teenagers or, early adolescents or, 20 somethings, right? So it's going to be a completely different sort of feel and look to the way that we're going to go about it. So the second stage in that one is to gather the visual elements, right? So once we sort of know our vision and our mission and all that's sort of dialed in to our branding, we want to gather the visual elements. And so the visual elements here we're talking about are going to be logos. Now, one of the really important things about a logo is while we may create one that we're really excited about, we have to make sure that we can get a logo to look good no matter what our background is. Some logos look fantastic on a white background, but you put it on a dark background and you can't see it. So we want to create a primary logo and we want secondary variations. So we want ones that maybe are the icon only, that are the text only. How do we want our name to appear, our brand to appear in text? And we want to probably create an inverse version, a negative version. So we have one that looks good on white backgrounds, one that looks good on dark backgrounds. If we happen to have one that looks good on both already, then that's great. In general, what we want to do is make sure that the logos are going to be very adaptable for different uses. And so it's generally smart, particularly if we're going to be doing any physical printing, to stay away from strong gradients or very complex colors, because those are hard to duplicate, especially in print, and they're very expensive as well. If we stay simple with our logo, it makes it much easier for everybody to use across every medium and across everything we're doing. And so gradients in particular don't print very well on anything that isn't just regular paper. And so it's smart, if possible, to try to keep the colors simple and less complex in terms of the way that we're creating our logo. So we want to make sure that we have a logo that if we test it on a light background, a dark background, various other places, we can do that. And we want various versions of it. So that way we know that. We want to take a look at a color palette. So for the color palette, we basically want a primary color and 3 to 5 complementary colors. We don't ever really want to go with more than 5. 5 becomes a lot and it becomes really hard to build a consistent brand. It might be fun to be able to use a lot of different colors, but again, our goal is to be recognizable once we have enough content out there in the universe. And so it's super important that we create a color palette and that we sort of stick to that, so that way we're able to make sure that all the things are going to be recognizable. And we want complementary colors. If you're not sure what those are, you can look up what's called the color wheel, and it'll show you any colors that are on opposite sides of the wheel are complementary. So they look really good together. Colors that are side by side don't. So you can use multiple shades of the same color or various different levels of intensity, but you also want complementary colors. So things like blue and orange, you'll see that a lot with optYOUmize. There are other, green and yellow tend to go well. There are a variety of different colors that will go really well together. And so we want to pick some complementary colors so aesthetically they look good, right? It's really important that the visual ease that people have when they're looking at our stuff is very high. We want it to be engaging and enjoyable to look at. We don't want it to be something that's hard to read or very jarring in terms of being able to see it. So when we create our colors, we want to include the hexadecimal codes. Those are just the 6-letter and number codes. That way they're uniform. So no matter who's making it on every single thing, if it's digital use, they're going to be able to use the same hex codes and get the exact same color. They're not going to have to try to visually match it with their eye. So once we have the color, you can even just Google like hex codes, and you can put in the color, and it'll tell you what the hex code is for it. And most graphic software does that as well. It'll tell you what the six letter or number code is as well. And that way we have the ability to recreate it every single time exactly the same. Now for typography, we want to choose fonts that are going to reflect our brand's personality. So the fonts are going to be really important. We want a different font, perhaps, for the headings, the body text, and special cases like taglines. But again, we want to go sparingly with the fonts. It's exciting to experiment and play with a lot of different fonts, but if we're using 8 and 9 and 10 different fonts, again, we're watering down any kind of branding. We typically want one main heading font, one body font, and maybe a third font for taglines or really short, simple things. And the rule of thumb is for headline ones, we want ones that look good, that are a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier in terms of their weight, almost, bold or black or various different colors or versions of it where the weight is heavy enough that it becomes very visible as a headline. For the body, we want it to be something that's very easy to read. So you don't want any scripts or anything that's handwritten as a body text because it becomes really difficult to read and people don't want to scan articles like that. Serif fonts usually work really well for body, and obviously you want the body and the heading to look good together. So they don't have to be the same font, but you want them to be the same. And then the tagline one can be something different. It can be more of a script, or it could be something a little bit funkier or whatever, just to sort of add a little bit more flavor. But it's used very sparingly, and it's only used for a couple of words at a time or whatever, so it's not anything where people need to spend a lot of time reading. The third aspect of that is the design guidelines. So we want to have some usage rules, how we're going to use each element. So for example, we want to specify the spacing around the logos, the acceptable color combinations, the font sizes for different applications. We don't, even though we have font families chosen, we don't want to just use 18-point font for this, 26 for that, 32 for that, 14 over here. We want to try to keep it pretty uniform. So that way we're able to, keep it to a minimum number of different things that we're dealing with. Now, examples of use of these things in action are actually really valuable too to include right in the branding kit. So mock-ups or examples of how the branding elements sort of come together in different contexts. So we can put a sample social media post, we could do a sample ad, we can do, sample, e-cover or whatever it is, business card. And that way we're able to see it and we're able to give a visual example to anyone and everyone that's looking at it so they get what the look and feel is that we're going for. And that's going to be really important because ultimately we want to make sure we're able to get that consistency all the way through. The fourth element of that the fourth step is to compile the actual branding kit, right? So at this particular point, what we want to do is we want to put it in a digital document. We obviously want something where we're going to be able to convey this and transfer it and share it with everybody and anybody who's going to be involved in our business. And this can include partners and people that are in the office with us, but also can include outsourcers and people that we may never come face to face with. So it's super important that we have that. And so it's smart to use software like, Adobe InDesign, or we can use Canva. Photoshop can work, but ultimately we would probably want to export it as an image, because if people didn't have Photoshop, they wouldn't be able to see it. We can export it as an Adobe PDF, because that's universally visible on every device in exactly the same way. So Canva, Adobe PDFs, those are really good ideas in terms of ways to put it all together in a document. And we want to keep it simple and organized. So there isn't necessarily one set format. You can look up templates for this, and there are some templates online that you can get, and they will be able to help you in terms of creating that exact thing that you're looking for, and you just edit the elements that you want. But at the same time, it doesn't matter if we go about it that route at all. It just matters that all the things are put together in one simple document, definitely no more than 2 pages. If we can fit it on 1 page, that's great, but a couple of pages is the general rule of thumb. We don't want it to be something that is too difficult to absorb or digest, or that takes people too long to go through. We want it to be something that when you open it and you look at it, it gives you an instant sense of what a brand looks like. And you can look up examples, and there are also examples that you can find online that will give you a really great idea about this. You'll see color blocks with the hexadecimal codes. You'll see the fonts in various different things. You'll see some sample images or stock photos that they would use. That way, they can basically create what the overall look and feel is. And sometimes there's a short description. So in addition to all the visual elements, just to see, it'll explain, this is the look and feel we're going for. This is the emotion we're trying to create in all the things that we're making among our audience. And so that way, everybody has that in the back of their mind as they go to create the things that they're going to create. And that's going to be really important, because once we're able to do that, then it makes it very easy to be able to create a consistent brand that we can build over time. So the other thing we can do is we can include interactive elements in it if we want. So, if we use things like Adobe XD or whatever, users can actually, click through the guidelines and they can access the assets directly. That's an advanced thing, so it's certainly not necessary or required, particularly for most people, most businesses, most entrepreneurs, but it's sort of just an advanced tweak I wanted to throw in there just in case. Generally, a simple 1 to 2 page Canva doc or PDF is going to be enough for this. And obviously you still have the ability to edit it, so if you decide to make changes, but it's better to try to dial it in first, make different examples of content with the styling and the branding kit you've chosen to see if it all gives you the consistent look and feel that you like. And if it does, you're good to go with it. If you find, geez, I didn't really like that font that I thought I was going to like when I actually see it down in a whole paragraph, so I'm going to switch that up. Smarter to go through a few of those iterations early on, so you're not making a lot of changes down the road. And so for people, it's going to be a lot easier for them to be able to use that branding kit. And then, we want to share and update the distribution of it. So we want to make sure that that branding kit is in the hands of every team member and every external partner. So whatever it is, if we want to put it in a Dropbox or some sort of a shared space where everybody can access it, it should be very important. And everyone in the company, everyone involved in creating any content, should be aware of the fact that this is the thing that needs to be used every single time you're creating anything. That's the go-to resources. Now, as your brand evolves, obviously you can update your branding kit. You can reflect any changes in logos, colors, guidelines. The nice thing about a brand is even though we want to build one, it doesn't mean we're set in stone. We can change it if need be. So we can always update our brand identity, make it fresh and consistent if we need to do that. But again, then it makes changes to it easy too, because all we do is update the branding kit and instantly everybody is now aware of the changes. So a well-structured branding kit is not only going to reinforce our brand identity, but it's also going to streamline the creative process for our team. So it makes things easier. There's a lot less wasted time. So if we follow all of these steps, then we're able to create a comprehensive and effective branding kit. And that branding kit is going to serve as a foundational tool for all of our marketing efforts, both internal and external, for everything that we're ever going to do. So the takeaway here is that creating a branding kit is super important because it gives us a consistent, uniform look and feel to every single thing that we create. And so our marketing and our content will become familiar and it'll become recognizable to our audience over time. And that's ultimately what we want because therefore it becomes more effective also. Branding can be very powerful in persuading our audience to be able to buy our products and services. And when we start off with a branding kit, that makes it very, very simple to keep everything consistent, and everyone on our team will be able to create content that's perfectly aligned. So while branding is obviously a long-term strategy, it is important to start as soon as possible. So that way we have the opportunity to benefit for years to come.